Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Waffle Press Retrospective. I'm your host, Diego Crespo, and happy Halloween! We're doing a Halloween episode again this year, but it's not John Carpenter. We're breaking our John Carpenter streak because we did a commentary for The Thing, which I'll put a link down to in the description below. And we're here to talk some other
We're doing a
nasty, scary shit.
Texas Chainsaw double feature.
Yeah, that's my
Ooh,
co-host, Matt Gringo.
that's me. And the real reason this came about is that we were all so miserable through the month of October. We both went, we were like, I don't want to I can't record any podcast about anything. And we were forced into recording one because of Netflix. So we've done one other recording, and then
But that one came out good. I'm excited to share that
that was
one.
fun because we all had. I was on fucking meds at the time, I believe,
Oh,
so
okay.
I had a lot of energy going into it. But and then I was like, I just don't want to talk about because the prime movie this year would probably be They Live. You know,
Oh yeah.
that's like the movie, the Carpenter, and I just wouldn't want to talk about it. Like, I would be too upset talking about it this year. So I was like, fuck it. We'll just sit this one out. And then I think like 3, 4 days ago, I was watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I just texted you and was like, we should do Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2.
We're gonna talk about them in full, so watch them if you haven't. But also, right off the bat, Matt, why one and two? Why not just one?
Because there's never a better double feature based on the first two films of the franchise in horror history.
That's a bold statement because a lot of people outside the our circles in the internet, at least,
Mhm.
might not even know about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And if they do, many of them tend to say things like, I heard that one wasn't as good, or that's bad.
Yeah, it has a weird. I think people have come around on it. It had a weird reputation for a long time, and I didn't see it for years just because I was kind of raised in a house where it was like all sequels are bad, you know, and I believed that for a little while. Actually, this is gonna be weird. You know the reason why I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? It's because back in the day, in the early YouTube days, I was a fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd. Remember that guy?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he did a review of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game, and he does a scene in his review that's a straight up parody of the Chop Top scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I didn't really get the reference, and so I looked into it, and I was like, oh, I should probably see that then. And so that's the reason I've seen Texas Chainsaw 2.
Well, thank you, angry video game nerd. I'm sure
Yeah.
everything you've done has aged wonderfully.
You know what? I'll show something. I'm at the point in quarantine where I'm revisiting tons of old internet media, just because like I don't know, I've like run out of things, and I checked out some of his stuff. I'm not gonna say it's aged well, but he's 100% what he is. You know,
Mhm.
like he's the angry video game nerd. He's like R-rated Pee Wee Herman.
Well, he's that's part of Cinemassacre now or something like that,
Well,
right?
that's his film company that he's always had. Like,
Okay, okay. Because all I know about him, I never got into him. I know he said he wouldn't review the new Ghostbusters or
yeah,
whatever. And apart from that, all I know about him is that he's had fans from the old internet days, and he hasn't gone on like some racist, sexist, misogynistic tirade or anything like that. So in my
yeah,
book, that's a pretty good sign.
yeah. He
All
seems
things considered.
if you were to do a political read of the angry video game nerd, he seems to have very centrist politics.
Mm.
He seems to be one of those guys that would probably be like, let's try to keep the politics out of it. But like, every now and then he'll show some side where it's like you're almost like, comrade angry video game nerd, like because he also does the Monster Madness videos, which I loved as a kid, which were like history of horror films. And one of those things where it's like, oh, this guy actually kind of like he knows more than just video games, which is why I think he's had some more staying power than other angry nerds. Like it seems like the angry video game nerd thing was always a side project for him. And he did a review of They Live, and he's like, there's a scene in it where there's like a 10-minute fight. It goes on forever. It's kind of ridiculous. But I think what it's about is how the working class is always fighting at each themselves instead of coming together and rising up. And it's like, wait, where did that come from? Like, I'm not saying that's a bad read. I'm just saying I wasn't expecting it from the angry video game nerd. So
Our video games.
yes, exactly. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, it's a good movie. Although I think anyone who watches it the first time is gonna go like, "The fuck was that?"
That's where I was, and we'll definitely get into that. But I didn't get it. Not that I didn't even like it or disliked it. I didn't understand how to approach that. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I think this is funny. I think,
Yeah,
but it's also revolting.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, because the thing you hear about it is the way like it's always been introduced to me is it's like a parody of the first movie, but it's made by the same director. Like it's like he realized he couldn't capture the horror of the first one, so he decided to make a parody of it. But even then, that doesn't really capture that movie.
Yeah, there you go. That's my. I'll piggyback off that too. Don't listen to anyone who says it's a parody of the first one. It's not really. I think. Correct me if this is a inappropriate take, but like I think it's about how you can't really capture crazy like that ever again.
Yeah.
So you just have to make everyone crazy.
Well, we'll get more into it, but I think the big thing for me, and this to me sums up everything you need to know about the late great Tobe Hooper, which is he, for years after making Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was annoyed that no one talked about the humor of the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. That he was upset that people didn't understand that there was a lot of like comedy in it. And watch that movie if you've never seen it, first time watch and be like, there's comedy in that? Like you can get it on first watch, but like of course no one picked up on the comedy.
Yeah.
Of Texas Chainsaw. So he made the sequel to be like, I wanted to like underline some of the things I felt people missed.
Look, I'm a huge fan of his work. I've been reading a lot of his stuff in preparation for this conversation, checking out a lot of his interviews. Every time he brings up that people didn't get the comedy, I think he's an alien from another planet. Because like, look, like there's a funny beat or two in that moment, or in that movie, right? They come and go, but there's not like, I don't know. I this is what I don't get. I don't get it as like some sort of black comedy. It's just such a terrifying experience of a film. Mm-hmm. Like it's like a nightmare captured on 16 millimeter and like shot into humanity's bloodstream, right? Like it's not like from this earth. It feels like almost.
Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels like they found footage of actual murders. Like
yes,
it feels like you're watching crime scene footage. Like that's like the whole movie. Like,
yeah, and he's like, no one thought that was funny, and everyone just coming out of the theater shaking, sweating, and like trying to get to their car keys.
Yeah, and he was like, it's a satire, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
yeah. And, you know, that being said, it is one of the greatest films ever made.
Oh no, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not to jump ahead, but I have my pages of notes, of course, Matt's notes. And I wrote at the end of it. And also, I should mention, I'm in a drunken stupor. I'm still recovering from surgery. And I wrote, the last line of my notes is, this movie is more important than the combined total of the French New Wave. So, that's my take on Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, fuck you, Jean-Luc Godard.
Yeah, fucking Godard. You never made anything this good. Did he? Did Godard even
No.
come close to Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Pierre LaFaux, who?
Yeah, go fuck yourself. Truffaut, you fuck. Um, but hey, it's a great movie. It's
Yeah,
just,
so
it's also
shoot.
I think you know this. It's a major influence on one of your favorite films.
Yeah, Tremors.
No,
No.
you idiot.
No,
I
it's a
thought you were
big
serious.
influence on Alien
I
for
thought you
Ridley
were,
Scott.
thought you were serious for a minute.
No, no,
Yeah.
no.
That's where like that moment where like Ridley Scott was just in the pocket of like being like, I'm not inspired by other alien movies. The horror I want to capture for my science fiction horror movie is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is the
It's not to
one.
even like get into another like discussion, but like that's kind of awesome, and I
That's
kind
like
of wish more movies did that.
that's the most brilliant move he made in a movie. Like with all my takes on Ridley Scott, Alien is just like wall to wall. Like every decision was the right decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's just that's just crazy to think about. It's like he saw that movie and it was like, I want to do that in space.
Which hey, not a bad way to go. But
Which
let's get into the plot. Everyone's favorite topics about movies. Plot.
yes,
Sally Hardesty and her brother, a paraplegic named Franklin, and their friends Jerry, Kirk, and Pam go to visit their grandfather, right?
they're going
That's,
to. Well, they're
they
going
just fucked that
to.
up.
No, they're going to the old grandparents' place because it's like by a creek, which we never see, by the way.
Yeah, they don't get
They
there.
never get to the creek, which is either like they just didn't think to film it or they picked a location that didn't have a creek.
Well,
But
not to derail our discussion again already, but this may come as a shock to you, Macaringo. But the production of this film was basically described as hellish.
oh,
So
really? Didn't
yeah,
pick up
they
on
made.
any of that while watching it.
Yeah, I can't imagine like why that would be. But yeah, so my guess is that they did plan to go to like a creek area at some point, and then they just got wrapped up in the filming of this monstrosity,
Yeah.
and it didn't happen.
Well, there's a few
There,
moments early on where you feel like some scenes were supposed to be longer, and then either they had like problems that day or they ran into something, and then suddenly there's like an awkward like wide shot and then voiceover that ends the scene. There's a couple moments like that early on, which if the whole movie had been like that, it wouldn't be the classic it was. They kind of knew to be like, we have to nail the horror at least. But yeah, this movie it feels very slapped together from time to time. But like what I was saying was, I believe they're going to the old grandparents' place for like a fun vacation. Even though I can't imagine anything fun about that house once you get there. But on the way, they go to investigate their grandfather's grave because the cemetery has been the victim of grave robbing recently.
we see that the aftermath of the grave robbing in that opening scene, and it's. Do you remember the first time you saw this? How old were you when you first saw this?
Too young. Um, Too young. I was 25. No. I saw this. I don't even know. This is one of those movies where it's just like it was one you had to seek out because it's still one of the horror movies they like won't play on cable. Like I did not like you could see Halloween and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street all like heavily edited for like TV, but you could still get the gist of those movies. You can't fucking edit this shit. So I probably saw it on DVD as like a teenager. Probably when Netflix was still sending movies through the mail. And yeah, it's one of those ones where I don't think I probably didn't really appreciate it the first time around because there's just not another horror film really like this, and it really catches you off guard the first time, and it's just a waking nightmare really. So like I don't even know what details I absorbed at the time, and whatnot, because it really fucks with you as a movie. But this opening really puts an emphasis on sound. Like we start on like a black screen with like, you know, grave robbing. Like you just hear the sounds of grave robbing, and then, you know, we get the sound of a Polaroid camera lens flash over like a corpse. And that's what this movie's, I think, real genius is, that the footage looks really grainy and personal, like crime scene footage, but the sound design is like perfect.
You know, it's kind of like that rule for podcasting where it's like it doesn't matter what your video looks like as much as your sound. It's because of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. No, but like I think quality sound goes a long way, and David Lynch is also known for his like amazing sound design as well. And because like look at like a lot of David Lynch stuff, like his more modern stuff is a lot of like lo-fi like special effects tech, but the sound is like perfect and it makes it feel like it's
Yeah.
part of the scene anyways. And so yeah, there you go. There's your filmmaking tip for today.
Well, the sound
Quality
will sell.
sound.
The sound will sell any bad effect. You know,
Mhm.
like it just makes it work. And thankfully, we on the Waffle Press have always stuck to a good sound rule.
Yep.
I hope
No bad history with that there.
I hope you enjoy listening to the echoes of my basement, which is the only place I can record right now. But we one thing we did cross over was the opening title crawl, which I just want to point out because the fucking guy doing the title crawl is fucking John Larroquette, which I think a lot of people know, but that's just crazy to me that this is like John Larroquette's first thing for Night Court. And then it was so important that he came back and did the opening narration for the remake, however many years later.
Oh wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. Talk about.
Oh,
Where's
and
John?
looking it up, he also did the narration uncredited for the prequel to the remake.
Hey now, everyone remembers that prequel.
Yep, I didn't know it existed.
I saw about half of it.
All right.
Where's John Larroquette been?
He was on. He had a little stint on Chuck, the NBC hit series.
Oh, Chuck. Everyone remembers Chuck.
I like Chuck.
Does Chuck hold up? I don't know. I never got into it.
It's got male gaze bullshit all the time, but like
okay.
otherwise, it's pretty fun.
But
I recommend Chuck if you could put up with male gaze bullshit.
But Chuck was still like 10 years ago. Where's John Larroquette been?
I don't know.
That didn't answer my question.
That's it. Maybe that's it. He's old, man. Maybe he doesn't
Yeah.
want to act anymore.
I know, but John Larroquette's like feels like a staple of like playing shitty villains in movies.
I think he was the villain in that fucking Mark Wahlberg movie.
Well, that doesn't narrow it down.
Yeah, never mind.
Oh, he was in Southland Tales. I forgot.
Yeah, but that was even older than Chuck, so fuck you.
Yeah, but still, that's great that he was in that. I was just gonna bring up the fact that he was the villain in Richie Rich.
Okay. Oh, you know what? He is in 2 episodes of The Good Fight, which I hear
There
is
you
very
go.
good.
Also, he was the narrator of Life Force, the other Tobe Hooper movie.
Oh my god, one year I want to talk about Life Force.
That
so
also
bad.
feels like a perfect 2020 movie. Because it just keeps escalating. It's like every 5 minutes you're in a different horror film.
You know what? Yeah. Yeah.
It's a movie that starts as like an Alien ripoff that ends with like an apocalypse.
With space sex vampires.
Yeah, energy, vampire, sex.
So along the way, that group of kids that we mentioned picks up a hitchhiker on the road. Now, what do you know about this hitchhiker, Matt?
He's a creepy looking guy.
Yeah, he's creepy as
Well,
fuck.
hold on, I gotta roll it back a little bit. This is classic
Oh
Mac
my
Ringo.
God.
Where my notes are very front loaded. Once the terror begins,
Okay.
we'll be able to get through it. But when I was talking the sound design in the opening with the grave, we also are getting like news reports that are describing that all these graves have recently been discovered as being vandalized and shit like that. Which also just this is another movie inspired by our old boy Ed Gein, who we last talked about on the Silence of the Lambs
Oh, that's right.
episode. because that was a big thing Ed Gein did, where he was grave robbing and then making furniture out of human skin, and keeping the corpse of his mother, up in the attic. Fun guy. He's dead. Don't worry. He's been dead for a while. But this is where I think we start getting hints of the Tobe Hooper humor, which is a very strange type of humor. But the reporter is talking about the grisly details of all these grave robbings, and he has a quote. He was like, "The sheriff said he had strong evidence linking the crime to elements outside the state." Which is like the classic thing, which we even see today, where it's like, oh no, this isn't something bad happening locally. This is outside agitators coming into the state. And it's like, well, the movie's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so we know it's Texas.
Yeah. Which actually, I think the one thing that I do understand about Tobe Hooper when he's talking about this film, it's still not really the black humor, if I'm being honest. But when he's talking about it as like being frustrated with not just like the staple of horror films of the era, but a lot of stuff like his political frustrations, like Watergate was just happening, right?
Yeah,
and
it's like this is
we're
right in
coming
the
off
middle.
the Vietnam War, and his frustration with like just the motion picture industry at the time. Like this is him releasing all his frustrations of the world back at the world.
Well, it's like this is his follow up to like a hippy dippy art film that he made, and then like didn't really get any traction, so he was probably like, fuck that. But yeah, definitely, this is definitely like the hippies are starting to like hit burnout, and it's like we reelected Nixon. God, I hope we're not feeling that in a few weeks. It's post Altamont, where it's like, oh, maybe this free love thing's not gonna work. Maybe we can't hire the Hell's Angels to be bodyguards and expect things to go okay. I mean, this is a movie where it feels like the world is ending at like the periphery of the frame.
Yeah, this feels more apocalyptic than some like actual post-apocalyptic films and stories.
And I think part of that is just its Texas setting. I think Texas just as a state feels like the end of the world. But you also get the news, the report, like after talking about the grave robbing, like segues into talking about like the oil crisis. There's an epidemic going on. There was a riot somewhere. Some fucking building collapsed and killed like 20 people. And the 70s is probably like the beginning of like that mass media era, which we're still kind of living in. I mean, it's very much changed. But there is that feeling of just hearing about nightmares happening in the distance, without ever actually seeing it.
And this is the result of that. This is the result of seeing it, I would say.
Yeah, I guess this is just this is visualizing just the terror that was going on under the surface in 70s America.
How much more do you want to break it down scene by scene?
I
feel like we're getting a lot of mileage without that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take your time.
We also, I think it's important to talk about the introduction of Franklin, where they pull over to the side of the road so he can take a piss. And we have to watch the slow, laborious scene of them, getting the ramp ready for him to roll out of the van. And it puts all the characters already just in a vulnerable spot. That like, oh, this is the guy who's going to have to go up against whatever this Chainsaw Massacre is.
Yeah.
But also, I think Franklin is what famed horror critic Joe Bob Briggs called the most detestable handicapped character in film history.
Good lord.
I mean, Franklin's a lot as a character.
Well, he's kind of a dope.
Yeah, he's a
detestable dope. Is like a whole other ballpark.
Yeah, I might be misquoting Joe Bob, so don't put those words in his mouth exactly. But
okay,
I think that's what he said, and it's also this thing of just like, you can tell just by this one scene, no one wants Franklin there. Like,
Yeah, like you go to a party and then it's like, oh hey, all our friends are here, and our friend brought that one friend also, and then
well,
the mood just kind of goes, oh.
it's very clear someone said you have to bring your brother Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what the underlying vibe is, and that's why Franklin, I think, is so like kind of off-putting as a character. Is you can sense that he's been a burden to his family his whole life, and they've made it very clear he's a burden without saying it, which is just like this awful detail that this movie did not need.
No, yeah, it's this is a mean film, believe it or not. But like, um, I also think it rounds out the characters in like a believable way, at least though.
Yeah,
It's not just a bunch of hippy dippy teens driving through Texas. It's like, I mean, even the trip is, it's their excuse to go like basically party, but they are going to see like what got fucked up from their family like plot,
yeah.
basically, right? So.
Well, also, I mean, to bring it back to my comment about the French New Wave, this almost could be like an experimental film, like, or like an art film, kind of like Jerry, where it's just like, we're just going to experience this moment. Like, if a Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't happen halfway through this movie, it could totally just be like a movie about like, oh, what's it like being a hippie in like the post-hippie era, you know? And it feels a little bit like, did you ever see Spike Lee's Get on the Bus?
No, I
Which,
haven't.
it's about like all the Freedom Riders, but it's done like, it's very much a movie that's like shot like on like really cheap cameras, and it just like captures what the experience of the Freedom Riders must have been like, where it's like you literally get on the bus with them, and then you ride on the bus with them,
Hmm.
and that's the movie.
Oh, that sounds actually like great. Like
It's
I'm
really,
very interested in watching that now.
it's really interesting. I like it. But it's like, it feels like that's what this movie could have been to an extent. It just so happens a Texas Chainsaw Massacre happens halfway through. And I mean, again, like, think about it. Like, if you want to talk about pushing the boundaries of cinema, like, we're literally, this is an opening scene where we're watching a paraplegic man try to like take a piss by the side of the road, which is an experience that, people probably in his circumstances probably go through, and isn't something that's captured on film very often.
Yeah,
You know,
and you know what? To its credit too, like that must be very difficult.
yeah,
Long journeys like that.
and it's clearly difficult for Franklin because he ends up going over that hill and crashing, which feels like it's a moment where it's like, is that Tobe Hooper black comedy?
I feel like stuff like that. I can get him being like, no, no. See, like I was being funny there. It's just like
Yeah, it's funny. We're
everything
laughing.
else.
We're laughing at a handicapped person fall down a hill, and it's played completely straight.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like, Tobe Hooper was a weird guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss him though. I miss seeing him.
Oh
pop
yeah,
up
no,
in
totally.
interviews.
Yeah.
This is the guy who did. This is the guy Steven Spielberg got to do Poltergeist.
Which is also a great film, just not the nightmare feel of TCM.
Yeah. It's interesting that that's where he ends up in just like less than 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt the need to talk about Franklin's introduction.
I got a soft spot for Franklin
Yeah,
because no one wants him around, you know.
he's given a pretty committed performance. I like the guy's performance, and you
Yeah,
get the sense that everyone was on set was like genuinely annoyed with Franklin.
No, I like the character and I like the performance because like once things start going weird, like with the hitchhiker, to get back to that, who's clearly just like off his rocker like immediately, right? He takes the Polaroid of Franklin, cuts his hand, smears blood all over the van, and then Franklin's the one. Everyone else wants to move on, but Franklin's the one who's like, "Hey, that was like really weird. Like, this is like something's off."
The only person, though, up until this point in the film that has treated Franklin as an equal is this hitchhiker. Which is another weird touch. Franklin and him have a conversation. And Franklin's like, man, this guy's a real weirdo. And then he's like, did you used to work at the slaughterhouse? Did they use that bolt that goes into the brain and pops out? And it's like everyone's clearly upset about Franklin talking about like this stuff, but Franklin really wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's just an odd little detail. And it's like, but it's like weird where he's like, man, this hitchhiker's weird. And then Franklin's like, Franklin, dude, you got some stuff going on. Also, one thing I got to point about the hitchhiker scene that I find hysterical is that the hitchhiker steals Franklin's knife, which is something Franklin's really obsessed with, that knife. Like this whole fucking movie's like, give me my knife. The hitchhiker cuts his hand and starts bleeding all over himself. And then they hang out with him for like 5 more minutes. It's only when he sets that picture on fire that everyone finally is like, all right, this has gone too far.
Well, you can feel like the tension like escalating in like every action the hitchhiker does once he's in the van, you know?
Yeah.
He's like this crazy bomb waiting to go off. And then he just kind of goes off consistently.
Yeah. I feel like this is also a moment where this is why I can't watch horror films with other people, where like the wrong lesson is taken away from a movie where they watch this and then the only take they walk away with is, that's why you don't pick up hitchhikers. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've had to deal with that in conversations. And it's like everything else about the movie goes completely over their head. But they're like, but they go, I wouldn't have picked up that hitchhiker. Well, my work here is done.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, it's almost like you're not the star of the film.
Yeah, tuxedo mask, waving, turning, walking out of the frame. Like,
yeah, but you didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. But, and that's something where whenever I see this hitchhiker, I think of, I saw Rob Zombie talking about, because of course this movie's a huge influence on Rob Zombie. He's been chasing this film his whole film career.
Yeah, geez, you think?
And he got a comment where he was like, did they just find crazy people for this movie? Because it feels like they just found this hitchhiker as like an actual hitchhiker and just put him in the movie.
Like what they did for Uncut Gems, but for crazy people.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, you got a minute? You want to be in a scene? All right, go ahead.
Also, he brings up, he describes the process of making head cheese at the slaughterhouse. And that was at one point, that was gonna be the original title of this film.
Head cheese?
Head cheese.
Head cheese.
Yeah, which maybe hints to where, Tobe Hooper's brain was more at when he was writing it. Which here's my recommendation to anyone out there making their horror film or whatever, any film in general. Don't be clever with your fucking title. You know why this movie works? Because it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Make the title exactly what your film is.
Head cheese.
Yeah.
I'm still just like trying to wrap my mind around that. That might be the worst thing I've ever heard. Like that that as a title just like is so repulsive and horrible. It hurts to say with my mouth.
You don't like head cheese?
I do not like head cheese.
Well, how does it work in compared to the original title for Star Wars, which, as you remember, was The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, as taken from the Journal of the Whills, Saga 1, The Star Wars.
I like that one better.
All right.
No, head cheese is just like so disgusting and vile.
Yeah.
Like,
no one's going to pay to see a movie called Head Cheese.
Yeah.
We should mention that the title of Tobe Hooper's directorial debut is Eggshells. Noticing a theme.
Plowing ahead.
From now on, after this, his movies are just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Eaten Alive, The Fun House. Like, he does not...
Thank God.
Spontaneous combustion. He does not hide what the plot is anymore.
Good man. Invaders from Mars. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Life Force is the one that you get some wiggle room with.
Yeah, that's the one, like, slightly ambiguous one.
Yeah.
And then it just ends up literally being about, like, Life Force. Yeah, hitchhikers, don't pick them up.
No, again, not the message of the movie, but
Old ways was best. It's talking about hitting animals over the head with a hammer.
you think that'll come back around?
Yes, actually. Automation put people out of work. That's where like you start getting the satire in this.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like these are people where it's like we're being left behind by America, and it's like there might be a reason for that.
Yeah.
Which we could probably talk a little bit about like the othering of certain people in America.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
like, think about like conservatives like nowadays in America, where they're like, oh, like the world's changing around us, we can't keep up with it, and it's like, yeah, no fucking shit. You have like Confederate flags hanging in your front yard, and
yeah.
like you're burning like Obama pinatas. Like, yeah, you think like
Well, this just shows
don't.
that the people that double down and refuse to move, the only logical endpoint is chainsaw massacres and cannibalism. That's literally the only direction holding onto your traditions leads to.
You know what? Maybe that is where the satire comes in with Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well. Like, they're speaking to a genuine like frustration a group of people have in America, like with the automation and stuff like that, moving
Yeah.
industries a certain direction. I guess the satirical element is like this is like the most absurd response ever to that.
Yeah. Well,
I
it's also
guess.
it really is about like that America's a country that just fucking the moment you become obsolete, America just leaves you behind. You
Mm.
know? That's really the heart of this fucking country.
I mean,
And
yeah. Oh, maybe that's why the hitchhiker and Franklin get along for a second, because it's like Franklin,
yeah.
for all his little goofiness and stuff like that, like clearly has had that problem his whole life.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it's, the metaphor gets very, very obvious when you go to Leatherface's house, and it's literally the furniture is made out of corpses. Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
living we're living in a decaying country. Which I hate to bring it to that, right
No,
now.
I mean,
But that's
if
just
if you
kind
don't
of
see that by this year, like,
yeah, just kind of what the film's about. Um, we finally get to the grandparents' house, which is like the ugliest fucking house I've ever seen. I
there's
can't imagine
there's
anyone having fun there.
oh well, none of this stuff turns out to be very fun. In all
Um,
fairness,
well, because to me, if you're a teenager, and to me, the idea of going to your grandparents' cabin in an isolated area is, all right, we're gonna go there and we're gonna have sex in a place where our parents can't catch us. Like that's the idea of that. No one would want to have sex in that house.
yeah. It's like actually, let's do it outside at night
Yeah,
instead.
that's
That just
like
feels better.
it would probably be better to have sex in the back of that like shitty van they're driving. And then of course we did skip over. They stop at the gas station where you meet the cook early on, and he's out of gas, of course. And he's like, "You should stay off of other people's property," which seems to be another thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and so of course that sets it something where it's like, all right, they're gonna need gas at some point. So the two characters end up wandering off at some point because they hear a generator running and like, oh, that person must have gas. It's actually a very like naturalistic way to kind of set up like how quickly these characters end up fucked by the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel the need to point out that the one female character that walks off was reading from a book about zodiac signs. And that feels like an attempt to be like people trying to find order in the universe. And this movie's like, fuck that. You're gonna make one wrong turn and you end up at Texas Chainsaw Massacre house.
Well, yeah. There's no order in this film. That's the whole movie is just about like
Yeah.
fuck everything.
Well, I also
You
think it's
know.
like a particularly unstable time in America, people looking for order in the universe. And I think you can draw a line to today where zodiac signs have kind of gone mainstream again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but man, how long into it when we end up going? It's like 30 minutes in when we finally go to the neighbor house.
Yeah, and even then, like I think there's a little bit after is when the chainsaw starts revving, so to speak. You know?
Well, at first, yeah, it's like you just this movie gets you like it's a slow burn because you just start hearing like engines running, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like where it's just like it puts you off kilter immediately, and there's just such a slow buildup of them approaching this house, and they're doing a very good job of like approaching it not frightened at all. You know, there's no part of that where in another horror film where everyone's like, I don't know about this. There's a little bit, but there's kind of like it's just a house, and they film it like it's just a house.
Mm-hmm.
There's a weird moment where they find a bunch of abandoned cars, which is one of those like subtle storytelling moments where, or you know, you could write you know, brush it off and be like, oh, maybe they repair old cars or something like that. When clearly that's not what's going on there.
You know what? It's framed like a normal house when the first guy Kirk is walking up to the house. It's normal there. Um, and I want to say before we get to the bodies dropping because they do drop hard in this movie.
Yeah, once it goes, it goes.
Yeah. That the actual like cinematography and like direction of the environments is like really almost kind of relaxing, but almost uneasy. Like I don't know, there's this weird
Yeah,
vibe. Like the sunsets are like really striking and gorgeous, and but it's also like desolate and empty, and like you really feel like the futility of what they're about to embark on. It's so
yeah.
weird.
Well, there's also this interesting thing they keep doing where the characters are so often in the background of shots where there's like flowers like extreme close up in the foreground, you know?
Hmm.
Like they're almost dwarfed by like the foliage around them. There's a lot of that in this movie, which it captures that feeling of like when you go out to the country and it's like, yeah, it's beautiful, but you're fucking being attacked by bugs the whole time.
Yeah.
That's what this movie feels like, and it's really like one of those things where like, you know, nature's the great equalizer, and you get that vibe. But I am so glad you brought up the cinematography because you know who the cinematographer is?
Daniel Pearl.
Daniel Pearl, who they brought back to do the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But you know
Which
what
is
else
not
he?
the problem with that movie, I just want to
Yeah.
say.
But you know what else he did?
Alien versus Predator Resurrection Requiem.
Hell yeah, man! Another point in the Matt Garingo box of AVPR is a secret masterpiece.
That movie is like this weird new nexus point for this podcast, I guess, because it is just unavoidable in like
Yeah.
so many discussions now. And now with the third Skyline sequel coming out and like a bunch of that crew going over for that franchise, like I I don't know, something's up with that movie.
I'm
Some
telling you, it's gonna get its day is coming. It's coming where people are gonna recognize it as an underrated gem.
still one of the more popular retrospectives we have on the podcast.
I
So
just want all you bastards to know I was first. First guy through the door takes a bullet to the head. So I was fucking first on Team AVPR.
it's got moments for sure.
I'm wait. Fucking 5 years from now, you're gonna be like, "Yep, AVPR is genius," like you've always believed that. You fucking coward.
No, I've been very clear that I do not believe that.
Yeah, but once the worm turns,
No.
once some fucking scholarly guy writes about it, and it's not just Matt Garingo sitting here doped up on oxycodone, we'll see. You'll all see.
Then you're gonna get bopped in the head by Leatherface.
Gonna bop you on the head.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
What if Leatherface came out and it was George Lucas?
I'm gonna bop you on the head. Boom. It'd be horrifying.
You know, Leatherface kind of has a George Lucas build. I gotta be honest.
Oh, this is the origins of Skywalker Ranch.
This is Skywalker Ranch. This is
Oh,
what George.
George.
No wonder George was busy.
Yeah, I'm making all these independent films, but I'm not gonna show them to anybody.
The
It's
old
just
ways was best.
Oh, what was that? You don't like my Star Wars prequel? So why don't you come out and check out my ranch? And he's just like cooking people.
Yeah.
He's cooking the haters.
He's making the digital film out of people. The other thing about cinematography is just like there are moments where like it's just like a static shot of just like a room or something that's like somewhat inconsequential, but like you don't know what you're looking at half the time, and that throws you off a little bit. I think of when the guy goes to the house the first time and he opens that door and we just get that shot of like the staircase and that long hallway and we see taxidermied animals on the wall, which isn't that uncommon, especially in Texas. But it like takes a minute for your brain to put together exactly what you're looking at.
And I guess this would be considered like one of the ultimate jump scares when Kirk is walking through that house and then Leatherface just appears, bops him in the head with the hammer, and he just goes straight down. Like he squeals, he hits him, and then he hits him again, drags the body away, and slams the door. There's no music, there's no other exterior sounds. It's just that action happening in the span of like 3 seconds.
Fucking got me the first time.
Yeah, it's fucking horrifying.
It's horrifying. It's genuinely like, and it's like, and again, I think it's the sound and not like a music sting or anything, and it's not even like a big like, blah. Like he just appears silently, and then it's that sound of that hammer hitting that skull. Like that's one of the most upsetting sounds I've ever heard.
Yeah, the sheet metal door. I don't know why.
That door.
That like just capitalizing on the scene just fucking ruins me.
If you have the Criterion channel, make sure you watch it's streaming currently on Criterion, and they got a very good copy because I rewatched my DVD copy and the Criterion copy recently, and I got a pretty cheap DVD version, but the sound was a little off. But the Criterion one sounds great, so be sure to check that out.
Okay, but after that, then the framing of the house starts getting a little weirder. You get that iconic shot with the shorts. I think if you look on YouTube, it's even called like Texas Chainsaw Massacre shorts scene. It's everyone's a fucking horn dog, but whatever. I
can't imagine. I gotta be honest. I can't imagine being horny for anything in this fucking movie. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, girl butt with the red shorts. Like, yeah, I get it because I'm a male dude in my 20s, but also like with this movie,
yeah,
you just kind of can't go there.
When you know where those red shorts are walking to, they're not exactly sexy anymore.
It's not arousing. I just get scared and worried.
Yeah. Now would be a good time to mention that Tobe Hooper filmed this movie hoping he would get a PG rating.
Yeah, this man was from another planet. This wasn't a human being.
Well, no, he was from Texas. So, if you want to
that explains it.
Yeah, I mean, that's Tobe Hooper, man.
He's like a legit maniac, and the more I discover about him, the more I appreciated him. Wow.
Well, I saw an interview with him where he like literally called up. I think he called up the MPAA or someone. He was like, "Yeah, I want a PG rating. My movie has a scene in it where a woman gets hung on a hook." And he's like, how do I do that to get a PG rating? And the guy on the other end must have been humoring him. Because they're just like, well, don't show blood. Like, don't show penetration, don't show blood. So he doesn't, but it's somehow so much worse what you see. And especially because he puts such emphasis on the fact that there's no back to her shirt. Like, it's like tied down like really low at the waist. And so we see her bare back a lot in this film. So we just, your brain does all that work for you. When she ends up on that fucking meat hook.
Like, I guess people have this, like, idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre more so than, like, the actual film. Not that it's not grotesque and horrifying when you're actually watching it, but, like, I could see, like, this getting no, it couldn't get a PG-13. But
absolutely
like,
not. Absolutely not.
No. But like, the movie does like it sets up the work for you. It doesn't actually show like blood and guts spilling all over the place. That doesn't mean it's not like provocative and disturbing because it so like clearly is like the most disturbing shit ever. And it's brilliant at that. Like that's part of its brilliance among like so many other things that we're talking about, like. It's like, oh my god, that was the bloodiest movie ever made. Like, no, it definitely wasn't. But that doesn't mean it was like not relentlessly disturbing to watch.
Yeah, it's just one of the most
You know.
effective movies ever made. It got in your
Yeah,
fucking
yeah.
head, man. Like that's where its brilliance comes in.
Yeah, so after the whole meat hook debacle, the movie just kind of doesn't stop at all.
Well, now we have to take the time to eliminate like one more character who I can't remember that guy's name.
I mean, that's the thing about a
Um,
movie like this is that, yeah, this is one of the greatest films ever made. It's not really big on character.
yeah, not a character-driven film. Although Leatherface is a very compelling character.
Leatherface is a great character.
Yeah.
Just horrifying.
You know who? Oh God, what's his name? He was on and wrote for the show Sherlock. Mark something.
Moffat? Mark Moffat? Is that the guy?
No, not Moffat. Not Moffat. The guy who's always with Moffat.
Oh, he plays Sherlock's brother, right?
Yeah, what's that guy's name?
Oh, I don't remember. Mark something. Let me look it up.
I think it's Mark Gatiss.
Mark Gatiss, that's it,
like
yeah.
that. Mark Gatiss. He did a little like documentary series that was like the history of horror films or something like that. And it was like it was basically like a thing of him just going through his favorite horror films. And it kind of ends with a bit of a like weak sauce thing of him being like, at a certain point he's like, he stops liking horror kind of after a certain point where he's like, I think it's all just shock and disgust and whatever, that's his opinion. But he talks about Texas Chainsaw Massacre in it, and in it, if I remember correctly, he says that he considers Leatherface to be the last classic movie monster, which I think is an interesting take.
I don't know. I've heard that, like, variations of that recently, actually. Not
Oh, really?
so much movie monster, but like he's the best of the slasher villains, I guess. And I don't know if I'd agree with that even. It's just something I've been hearing a lot recently, and I'm wondering why that is. Maybe more people are watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre just to feel something again.
Yo, maybe it's that fucking Criterion has Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Or
right
that
now.
too. Yeah, that's a good reason.
I'm just saying that what Criterion puts on, it tends to determine the conversation in film Twitter.
They're just
But,
that obvious.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's film Twitter. That's who we are. And now, no offense, all right, not to be like a stick in the mud, but now everyone is spelling Texas Chainsaw Massacre differently.
Well, there's
Did you notice
it's Texas
that?
Chain space Saw sometimes, right? And then Texas Chainsaw, one word.
Yeah. Well, now everyone is spelling it with the space.
Oh, okay.
Because that's how Criterion did it. To the point where it is now how it is written on the Wikipedia page.
What I was listing the films I watched for Halloween this year. It's one word for me. I'm sorry. That's it.
Yeah, it's one word. Fuck it. All the sequels are one word. It's one word. And the fucking poster, the great poster, it's one word.
Yeah.
So I'm going with that.
Oh yeah, that poster fucking rules.
Yeah, I gotta get that poster. That's a great poster. Although that might be like a red flag poster.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I'd hang it up and be like, oh hey, welcome to my humble abode, like on a first date or something like that, and just have that hanging up in your living room, like.
Yeah, if there's an opposite of a date movie, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That might just be an opposite of a movie. Like I mean this in the positive way, because it's such a visceral experience to sit down and like watch that, I don't know, you kind of do have to be in the mood for something like this.
You kind of both have to be on the same page. Like, this is one of those ones where it's entirely plausible that your soulmate, you guys will, if you like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you will never watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre with them. Because it's just not a movie for everyone. But to get it back to Leatherface, with him being the last classic monster point, a big thing he pointed out was that scene where he kills the third guy, and there's just this great moment of Leatherface running around the house scared. Because what's happening here really is that he's just really upset that people keep showing up at his house. Like, he's genuine. It's just it's a funny moment to me where it's like he's like, why do, like, he's afraid of the people that he's violently murdering.
You know, maybe that's another angle on the satirical side of it, like
a little bit, yeah. I do think there is a lot of comedy in this. It's just, it doesn't matter. Like, the fucking Marx Brothers, the Marx Brothers could show up in this goddamn thing and it would still be a horror
No, the
film.
Marx Brothers show up, and then Leatherface drags him to the basement and hangs him on meat hooks.
Yeah, and he fucking murders Harpo. Like, Harpo screams for the first time as he's being murdered. But, yeah, well, I mean, it's also to bring it back to Rob Zombie. That's been Rob Zombie's whole shtick, is that all of his movies are very explicitly him trying to combine Texas Chainsaw Massacre with comedy. Like, I mean, you know, it's explicitly Devil's Rejects is supposed to be like a kind of riff on Marx Brothers. And, you know, Three from Hell is straight up Three Stooges.
But no, Leatherface is I mean, he's clearly got some developmental issues, and so there's like a tragedy there in that in his upbringing, I guess we'll call it. You know?
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, there's some gawking going on at like mentally handicapped. I mean, you know, that's just stuff. People, that's just stuff that kind of has to go along with the horror genre a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's like...
I don't think there's a single horror film that doesn't have at least one giant problematic thing in it.
Is it time to cancel Leatherface? Sorry.
Oh, Leatherface. You killed one too many.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, especially from like... I'll call it the before era, before COVID. You know, yeah. There's just bound to be some stuff in that territory.
Yeah, I think we're finally past the point where like I could go somewhere and be like, oh man, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is great, and then not have a stranger show up and be like, oh, how could you? Texas Chainsaw Massacre is disgusting in its portrayal of, and it's like, you know, you got a point, but like, go away.
Yeah, I mean, I think
there's other points to be made.
I think that's one of the issues we kind of started having with social media. And that's not even, like, it's good that people are being more aware of these things and being made more aware of certain issues in, like, media and representation in society. Like, that is an objective good thing. But then, you know, you don't have to bring it up at every, like, possible opportunity. Like, if someone's talking about, like, you know, I had this really good chocolate from See's Candy today. You don't rush into them like actually, you know, See's Candy is using like child labor laws in Brazil and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's important to note that, but if someone's just like la da 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 da, you know, you don't hit them with that brick over the head.
Well, a lot of times, thankfully, I think it's mostly younger people, you know, and they gotta rebel, they gotta try out shit like that. Better that than them just quoting South Park.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and I mean, like there are much bigger fish to fry here. This is not real. This is me being an old man on a porch at most, you know. Like,
I will say one thing though that is eternally infuriating are the people where like you see when they play those cards, you know. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, oh, you just happen to not like that movie, so now you're playing the card about how it's offensive, but then there's a movie that does the exact same thing, but you like that movie. You know? I'm not saying don't examine the problematic elements, I'm just saying that acknowledge that they tend to be in some of your favorite movies, too.
Yeah. Every movie has pterodactyls.
Yes. That was the thing we invented that one time.
I brought it back.
Which we're not even going to explain.
Nope, I'm going to make a t-shirt, though.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good t-shirt.
Orson Welles and a pterodactyl.
I just want to point out...
Sorry. Let's go.
I just wanted to bring up that a lot of Leatherface's performances thanks to the late, great Gunnar Hansen, who, this is, you know... Everyone, like, hypes him up, but he does give a great performance, even though this is kind of like the one big movie he did. Like, he unfortunately only pops up in other movies with Chainsaw in the title that aren't sequels to Texas Chainsaw.
How dare you? He also starred in the hit film Mosquito.
Oh, yeah, my favorite movie. Well, guess what he wields in the climax of Mosquito?
A hammer.
Guess what he picks up and he's like, oh, yeah. He fights a bunch of giant mutant mosquitoes with a chainsaw. I love that movie though. That is a good movie.
Is it?
if you like that sort of thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing, people. Mosquitoes about giant mosquitoes. How do they become giant? Well, of course, an alien spacecraft crashes and mosquitoes drink the blood of a dead alien. Took a real straight line to get to that one. But Gunnar Hansen was one of those guys where he would like pop, he'd pop up in horror documentaries, and it was always kind of nice to see him because he always kind of seemed to have a little more insight than the average person that was their one claim to fame, Like where you see some people like the guy, like use that. I don't want to dunk on him, but the guy who played Jason in Friday the 13th 1 for like that brief scene. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, he pops up at the end.
He is in every horror convention, like just coasting off the fact that he was technically the first Jason.
I mean, to be fair, I would try to coast off that too.
I would too, but Gunnar Hansen was also a guy like it wasn't like he didn't do horror conventions and stuff, but he also kind of seemed to have more of like an understanding of like, look, I did this movie in 1974. I had fun making it. I really like doing it. I'm glad people like it, and wasn't trying to be like, I'm the first Leatherface, and
There's a little more protein in his like discussions.
Yeah. To the point where I mentioned this to you off mic, but he wrote a book about Texas Chainsaw Massacre called Chainsaw Confidential, which I've heard is good, but I haven't had time to read it. And that could also be seen as like, oh, he's trying to capitalize off it. But from what I understand, he's a writer. He's like, that's what when his acting career didn't really go anywhere, he became a writer. His publishers wanted him to write an autobiography. And he was like, I don't really want to write an autobiography. I'd much rather write a book about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, like, he was encouraged to write an autobiography and instead chose to write about his experience on Texas Chainsaw and then, like, interviewed everyone that was still alive at that point. So, good for him.
Yeah. I guess check it out if you're interested. I haven't read it, so.
Yeah. Go to your local library right now.
Maybe don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Do it when it's safe. In 2023.
Yes.
The rest of the movie is... We could, like, break it down scene by scene, but I do want to start talking about Texas Chainsaw 2.
Yeah, we'll get into it real quick.
The finale is just, like, a continuous, like, escalation of nightmare.
Well, you do have to mention that Franklin gets chainsawed to death in a wheelchair.
He does, and it's very unsettling. I don't think there's a single drop of blood in that scene.
You can if you watch it, especially the Criterion cut, which is like a little cleaner, you can see them throwing blood onto Leatherface a little bit. You can see a little bit of splattering, but it's so subtle, like it's very understated.
I really like the look of the night in that film, where it's like, to go back to that nature and like the landscape discussion, where it feels like it's inescapable at that point. Like, if you look at the scene, like you try to like break it down moment to moment, I don't really have a sense of direction of where they're running to and from, but I think that makes it even scarier.
Well, it's
because it is like a nightmare, like there's no escape.
Well, it feels like you're right there, and I think it's one of those things where, like, that's not how you would light a night scene,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I went out and I'm like, all right, I want a chase scene through the woods, you would not light it that way. And it's just like through, not to like, dunk on them, but it's like through sheer incompetence stumbling into brilliance. And just like that's what gives it its flavor. Where it's like they didn't really know how to light the scene, but that's what makes it so much scarier. You know what it actually reminded me of? This is going to be a weird pull. Get ready.
What?
Red Letter Media?
Oh my god.
I own the movie they made like a decade before they got famous. Called Gorilla Interrupted.
Oh my god.
And there are scenes in that movie where Rich Evans is the star of it, and they just threw Rich Evans in the woods like barefoot and like made him like walk around, and he's getting genuinely hurt on camera. And it's just like him like falling through the woods, or like go fall like through a bunch of like bushes and shit, and he's like, you're watching someone really get hurt, And that's exactly what you're watching in Texas Chainsaw when you're watching Sally like try to get through those like trees.
Yeah, she's actually getting cut up and shit from
Yeah.
those.
Everyone talks about Stanley Kubrick deliberately torturing Shelley Duvall on the set of The Shining to get her performance, which, fuck that. But
Yeah.
it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre did the exact same thing just on accident. Like, it was just through, like, non-union film crews not knowing how to make a movie. They inadvertently captured the terror that Stanley Kubrick was going for. And maybe a little better, frankly.
I'm not a Stanley Kubrick dunker by any means, but I do prefer Tobe Hooper's filmography. Like just on a personal level,
What
that's
was
just
that
what
name?
I prefer.
What was that name you just said?
Toby Hooper. Toby Hooper.
I'm never letting you live that down because you fucking made me. I had it right, and then I humiliated myself in front of the world because you talked me into his name being fucking Tobe Hooper. Fucking guy. I want people to know
I'm
that.
sorry. Oh, I'm
that's,
sorry.
I've said a lot of embarrassing shit on this show, and that's like the one thing that's gonna haunt me forever.
Toby, potato.
And the last like half hour of this movie is just Sally running from the sound of a chainsaw.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, there's the iconic dinner scene.
We meet the cook. There's a great scene where the cook beats her with a broom. But there's also this like great like shot where like there's never a moment of dialogue that says it, but where she's slowly putting together that the hot dogs the cook's been making are probably made of human flesh. That's a great little moment. And it's just a great, like, scenes like that don't really need to be in this movie where he, like, wraps her up and throws her in the car and he's about to leave and he's like, oh yeah, I gotta turn off the lights because I don't want the electricity bill to be too high.
It's hilarious, but it's also, like, just so terrifying because, like, this whole world of this girl has been destroyed now. Like, she's not coming out of this okay, like, even if she survives,
I
you
think
know?
that's
and
where
like,
the humor comes from, where it's like, this is the worst day of this woman's life. She will never get over the events that are occurring to her in this film. And then for these three chuckleheads, it's like an average day.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That's where I think some of the humor comes from. Where, like, when he gets to the house, he's like, look what your brother did to the door. That's
oh my god.
That's really funny. And then we find out that Grandpa's corpse that was in the attic isn't actually a corpse, that he's still alive. Where he's like drinking the blood from her finger. Like,
oh, that's so like just the way this movie gets under your skin with shit like that, just constantly. They find new ways to like agitate the human body.
Yeah, it's like it's I think I've heard it described as one of those movies that makes you want to take a shower after it's over.
Oh yeah.
Like
it's one of those movies I want to like drench myself in bleach with.
Yeah.
After, you know, like
yeah, just pour bleach into your eyes so you can get rid of the horrible memories.
Or like, you know, Danny DeVito and It's Always Sunny when he's like dousing himself in Purell.
Yeah.
I just want to be pure. Like that's me after watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I got to talk about a weird little moment in this, which is when the cook can bring Sally, like right before dinner. Leatherface, you know, he's been putting on different faces and stuff like that. He's at this point in the film, he's very clearly dressed up in a more feminine way, with his Leatherface get up, which we can talk about. You know, like that goes back to the Ed Gein thing with like them making the suit like out of like women parts and shit like that. But it's also like this really weird moment where it's like like because Grandma is dead, she is like a skeleton upstairs. So Leatherface has just taken the place of the only woman that was in this group, which is just like a moment that like you don't want to think about too long. You know, not to open up that gender can of worms, but it's just like I can't not at least acknowledge it. And talk about a genre that's kind of had some gender problems. It's horror, but
yeah, oh boy, has it. But yeah, like how do you even like approach that?
Yeah, I
in a discussion.
I couldn't like not acknowledge, but I also have to point out that there's the cook is like yelling at Leatherface, who's like being very submissive, which is like the first time we've kind of seen him do that, and he's like, what are you doing? You get rid of the bodies. And Leatherface is like, oh no, I took care of it. Look like he's like pointing. I was like, I put one here, I put one here, I put one here. And then he's like, the cook's like all right. And then he's like, but you broke the door, and then starts hitting them. Like, it was like he was looking for an excuse to just start hitting Leatherface.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I think some of the weird, like, dark humor of the movie, which again, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's equally as horrifying. I actually read a really good take, which is that, like, this movie lives in, like, this weird area where it is simultaneously both comedy and horror, like, not in the way that we have comedy horror movies, where it's like the comedy elements and the horror elements feed each other, and then it grows at like an exponential rate.
That's an interesting take. I don't know if I completely agree with it, just because to me the horror is so overwhelming.
We can just skip to the last 10 minutes of the movie, which...
Yeah, because it's just a chainsaw chase where Sally jumps through 2 glass windows.
Yeah, and I also mentioned this, that like I've been loving the Criterion Channel's 70s horror collection, because like a lot, like I would say like half of them are good, half of them are bad movies, you know, like
Yeah.
But every one of them contains a moment that I would consider like cosmic level good. Like, at least one moment. And like for Wicker Man, I think like Wicker Man, like if you seen the original Wicker Man?
I have.
Yeah, that's a like solid movie, but it's not like horrifying until like that last stretch, really.
Yeah.
But those last 10 minutes of Wicker Man are like cosmic, and I feel the same way about the last 10 minutes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just that the rest of the film happens to be horrifying too in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But like that last like chase of just like you're just hearing that chainsaw and just like the lighting, and then it's like it's the middle of the like it's sunrise. Like that's where it's like that's the other thing where it's like you thought they were having dinner in the middle of the night. They were having breakfast.
Yeah.
It crashes through that window and it's daytime. And oh my god, like I can't even like no words I could do right now could really justify how good the last 10 minutes of this movie are.
Yeah, it does feel like I know we keep saying it feels like a nightmare, but like there's no better explanation for like what this movie presents itself as, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there is that segment when Leatherface is chasing Sally right out of the house, and it's like that right early hour of morning where the sun's not quite out yet and it's kind of like misty and foggy, and it just feels like she left a place that she didn't enter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's so oh god. It's so
yeah, and then by the time she gets back to the road, we're just like, please end, please, something happen. Like, just let it end.
Yeah.
And like the movie doesn't really have like anything we'd consider like a traditional ending, you know? And like I think that's to its benefit, because there's no better encapsulation to this movie than Leatherface swinging his chainsaw at sunrise
the chainsaw
as Sally
dance,
screams and laughs away.
The chainsaw dance is like just that's beautiful, is what it is, frankly.
Yeah,
like that's
you can kind of see him almost kind of catch the camera guy with the chainsaw.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. Well, it's like they literally just like whip this chainsaw around. Like that's crazy. Like
yeah.
I'm sure they took like the sharp parts out of it so it wouldn't hurt anyone, but still. Like,
I don't know.
Well, have you ever done Halloween Horror Nights?
I have. Those are awesome.
And I
miss them.
Yeah, they do the like Chainsaw Brigade every now and then. Where they have people, those, if you look at them, they're like functioning chainsaws, but they take out the moving parts. Like they take out the like I don't know what the term would be because I'm not a mechanically minded person, but the part that would actually cut your skin is removed, but it still revs up like a chainsaw. So I think that at least I hope that's what they did.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, who knows, because the way the rest of the production played out.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's the last thing we need is some camera guy at the last day to get fucking clipped by the chainsaw dance. But no, like I said, it's such a fucking great moment. Very close to being the best film of 1974.
What would be better? You think?
The only film I could like, I was gonna be like Mr. fucking cool horror guy because I've been making my lists for like every year, and I was
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna put Texas Chainsaw. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I think that's like Godfather 2 year. I think that's fucking Chinatown year. Like, I don't give a fuck. I'm putting Texas Chainsaw above him. But then I saw A Woman Under the Influence was 1974, and I was like,
Oh.
fuck, I can't. Like, that movie's too good. You know.
Yeah, that it almost feels wrong to put other movies in front of that
I
one.
finally had the balls to say that Night of the Living Dead is a better movie than 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I couldn't go the extra mile and say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was better than A Woman Under the Influence. So,
John Cassavetes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
you know what? He would have been the guy to do it, frankly.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
he could have done it. He probably had no fucking interest and was probably disgusted by the suggestion, but he would have been the perfect dude.
So, we've got to move on, though, to Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. And I don't
Yeah.
feel like we're leaving the first film in the dust because, it's all Tobe Hooper's
It's
filmography.
impossible to leave this movie behind. Once it's with you, it's with you forever.
Yeah, it was unleashed into the world, and there's no escape from it.
But this movie's made like over a decade later, produced by fucking Canon Films, which is crazy because I don't know if you know this, but one of the multiple crazy things about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that the distribution company that they picked for the movie ended up being a mafia front.
Whoa.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, so there's like all these controversies because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that I think, adjusted for inflation, made like over $100 million.
Good lord.
Like, it was like this genuine hit, and everyone on it got paid by getting a percentage of the film. Like, that was how,
that's good.
how everyone was going to get paid. Well, yeah, good idea, but not when the distributors are mafia. So guess who didn't end up seeing any of the fucking money?
Oh, no.
I think a little later they all saw something, but it wasn't what they were owed. And
that's too bad.
I'm willing to bet it turned out to be one of those problems where the release was like a mafia front, and then the movie was like too successful. I'm willing to bet like some eyes were looking at them that they weren't hoping to see. I know it was like this whole thing. Because, like, I guess what happened where, like, Tobe Hooper couldn't find it because no one was, like, people saw this movie and was like, we're not distributing this fucking thing. Like, no one wanted to do it, so he ended up with, like, a mafia front. I think it was, like, a mafia front in conjunction with another group that I also believe did, like, Deep Throat, the pornography movie.
You know what? Oh, no, never mind. I'm thinking Night of the Living Dead. Because that one had a porn producer trying to go straight, too.
Yeah.
Right?
Man, that's like the era of, that's why cinema was good. You had all these fucking porno makers that were like, yeah, but I gotta make something that's not porno.
See, that's what we need nowadays. I need a Brazzers-produced Avengers film.
Hey, no, here's what you do. All the women that are fucking going to the bank with all the money they're making through OnlyFans because of quarantine, fucking start financing movies.
Oh, hell yeah.
All the people that are, especially the professionals, if you got photographers or something, all those guys secretly in their back pocket have some art film they want to make. Fucking finance it. I want.
Oh my god!
I want
that's what I want to see.
renaissance of cinema that was driven by OnlyFans.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. The Buzz is back. Directed by Tobe Hooper.
Roger Ebert called this film... Actually, he didn't call us anything. He said, it carries a proud old name in the annals of exploitation, but its only ambition is to outgross the original film. It fails. This is from his 1-star review.
Well, he's not entirely wrong. That's why Cannon made this movie.
What is the deal with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
There's no one sentence that can sum that up. Like, I guess one thing to point out is that it was written by L.M. Kit Carson, who wrote fucking Paris, Texas. This is his follow-up to Paris, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like one of like the many things that's up with this movie.
That's a terrific film, and nothing like this film for anybody who wants to watch other cinema.
Canon Films presents Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, written by L.M. Kit Carson, starring Dennis Hopper, and the poster looks like The Breakfast Club. I mean, that's all you need, right?
Yeah, I guess.
This is like an unsolvable math problem. Like, none of those elements should ever be in the same sentence.
And yet, not only are they in the same sentence, they're sometimes in the same scene.
Oh, boy. Yeah, this is... So, as we talked about, Tobe Hooper was very upset a lot of people didn't pick up on the humor of the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, at some point, I don't know exactly how the deal was made, but, like, Canon got the rights to Texas Chainsaw Massacre at some point. And I guess they offered it to Tobe Hooper, who was in the Canon wheelhouse at that time. I believe this is after Life Force.
Yeah, this comes out a year after Life Force.
And he makes this and Invaders from Mars in the same year for Canon Films.
Good lord.
Which is crazy. I don't know why Canon stuck with him, because, like, all three of these movies bombed. Like, but I guess they liked him.
Yeah, I mean, this one did better than those.
Yeah, this one did the best, but I know that they were like, particularly upset with this one, because they felt it wasn't the horror film they wanted. Which, also to bring it back to New Wave, is like that time Canon Films produced Jean-Luc Godard's adaptation of King Lear. And Jean-Luc Godard put audio of those, what are those guys' names? Golan and Globus, one of those guys yelling leaving an angry voicemail about him making the movie and some of the weird things he was doing, and put it in the film. Because King Lear Jean-Luc Godard's King Lear is kind of like a prank on Canon Films.
I like French New Wave now.
Yeah, no, it's not a good movie. It's really not worth it. Like, it's, you know, it's like, oh, that's funny. And then, like, oh, there's, like, a movie, too. Like, so, what is the plot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
A radio DJ named Stretch is on picking up phone calls on her talk show, show, whatever.
This movie jumps through so many hoops to bring these elements together. Like,
it does, but here's how it opens, with a chainsaw fight.
a moving car chainsaw fight.
Yeah, that the DJ Stretch picks up on her radio show, records it, and takes it to a former Texas Ranger named Lefty, played by Dennis Hopper,
who has been hunting the chainsaw killer across Texas.
Oh yeah, he's Franklin and Sally's uncle, right?
And he gets a great, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but he gets a great soliloquy with Franklin's destroyed wheelchair.
Oh, well, it's Franklin's body.
Yeah,
Franklin's
but
body's still in
the wheelchair is still there. They left, even in death, Franklin got stuck in that fucking chair. But, yeah, it's, you know, that seems simple enough, I guess.
I've really simplified it because these elements kind of come and go at the beginning for a little bit.
Yeah. It's impossible to be like, this is what Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is about. Because, yeah, I think, for one, I want to say, with this opening, I think there's a little bit of commentary going on between the shift in our culture between the 70s and 80s, where you get a lot of, I feel like there's a lot more sympathy for, like, the, like, kind of burned out flower children of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Whereas here, like, the two teen characters we're introduced to in the beginning are, like, they're just disgusting and awful, and they deserve what they get.
They're John Hughes characters.
Yeah.
Hey-o!
You know what? You're right. Yeah, they kind of are. John Hughes characters. I wrote a thing here to describe them that I probably can't say on the podcast. Should I say it and then you can cut it if you think it's too much? All
Sure.
right. I wrote it was like young people in the 70s versus 80s. I wrote, these guys look like the type of people who would cover up a
You're not wrong.
Not wrong. Is this one for the uncut listeners?
I think so. Whoa.
Patreon numbers dropped to 0.
Oh my god.
I mean, that's the vibe I got.
Yeah.
They look like all the teens that were like that liked Reagan, you know?
So like I said, John Hughes characters.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I have a particular beef. I gotta be honest, like, you know what, if you're older, fine, you're probably nostalgic for the good old days, whatever. But I believe that if you are between the ages of 18 and 40, it is your duty to not like the president. I do not like people of our generation that like the president, no matter who the president is. It's our job to not like the president. So, yeah, I just got like a very like, oh, these kids like Reagan. They were raised by hippie parents, and now they're going to support Ronald Reagan and, you know, H.W. Bush, and then fucking Newt Gingrich and his fucking contract with America.
Jesus. Yeah, no, they're shitheads. There's no sympathy for these people.
Luckily, one of them gets their fucking face sawn in half with a chainsaw.
And that's a great effect.
Oh, it's so good. It slides off.
I know. And like I saw how they did it because I like the channel Dead Meat.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
And they go in detail about that. And so like I guess they kind of like sewed it together, and then after the quote unquote cut in the scene, they like pull this string and it just lets it kind of open up like a flower. It's so nasty, but it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's awesome here. It's horrifying in the previous film.
I gotta ask.
So I get why that's like not for everyone.
Again, talk about shifting norms where it's like, I think this is why Tobe Hooper decided not to make this horror film. It's like, by this point, we've had about a decade of Texas Chainsaw imitators, and they've all been pushing the boundaries of violence. So I don't think this is just a parody of Texas Chainsaw 1. I think this is just a parody of the slasher genre in general.
I'm glad you said that, because honestly, I kind of got like New Nightmare Scream vibes.
Yeah.
In a way.
And I mean, and this is the year, I think, where you start seeing like Nightmare and Friday the 13th start getting a little more self-referential, you know? Like, this is where that shift starts. I don't think it goes into full swing until after this, but I think Texas Chainsaw was like the first to be like, we're parodying the genre, and we're just going to lean into the tropes and have fun with it, while also delivering on disgusting horror.
Yeah, like fun. It's fun to watch, but like the events of the film are still like terrifying.
Yeah, well, it's one of those ones
You know?
where it's like, you know, like I said, the first movie, it's like you want to take a shower movie. This one, you're kind of like impressed with the violence in it.
Yeah.
Although there are a couple moments that are like shower inducing, I guess would be the phrase.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta say, what the fuck is going on with this scene? Like, Leatherface gets out of the car and is like dancing with the corpse.
Oh, that corpse is supposed to be the hitchhiker, right?
Is it? I
think so.
I never picked up on that. Oh, that's great if that's true.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's because like that is Chop Top's brother. Right?
Oh, okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never picked up on that one. That's on me. But he's like, but like Leatherface does a dance with them.
Well, because they're family. I don't know.
I just don't understand. Like, I like when you watch a moment like that, you're like, what was writing that scene like? Like, what does that say on the what does it say on the script? You know?
Well, like here's the thing, because I think it's clear we're both fans of this film. I don't fully understand this film. I will make no like pretense about like this is what Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is about. I have some ideas about what it's about moment to moment. I don't understand like
Yeah.
it while I'm watching it at all.
Now here's a question: did you watch it by yourself this last time?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes it, because this movie, I can't think what it is. Anytime I've watched this with someone, the movie suddenly clicks. Like, there's something about
Really?
the
Okay.
communal aspect of watching this movie, because it's just, especially if it's with someone who hasn't seen it, it's fun to start watching their reaction, and then, like, you're just bouncing off, like, when you go, like, what the fuck is that? They're saying, what the fuck is that? So, which, to bring it back to George Lucas, I also think the perfect way to watch the Star Wars prequels is with people. I think that's the way you're supposed to watch those movies, because you can bounce off, like, talking about scenes while they're happening.
So you can get the high ground.
Yes! I just did a yes.
Yes, Queen.
But, yeah, that's exactly what you do. So I think that's a way to watch it. But yeah, there's no answers. There's only questions.
But one of the things I do think the film is trying to like be about, and I think actually succeeds, is like not just like poking at the slasher genre in the midst of the release of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the sequel, but like the iconography of Texas specifically.
Yeah.
Like with the chili contest, right? Like how oblivious the people are. Like the lady pulls out a tooth from her chili that she eats.
Yeah.
And she doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think it's trying to be nice about anything at all. You know what I mean?
I also
think... And later in the film, like, Lefty breaks down, like, that wall, and a bunch of guts come out. And that wall is, like, a Texas icon or something like that, right?
It's a very explicitly a, you know, I believe it's maybe the Alamo or something, but it's something commemorating U.S. history, right?
Okay, if it's the Alamo, that's perfect.
Yeah,
like
it's something.
That's
It's something like that, and it's literally like, oh, behind this mural depicting greatness is blood. Like, it's pretty on the nose, but yeah, I think that's partly what it's going for too. I also think it's the rise of Texas a little bit, because Texas suddenly becomes a much more powerful political force in this country around that time. Because we go from Texas being like, you know, you put Texas in the title of Texas Chainsaw Massacre because Texas is supposed to be a frightening place. And now it's like, oh no, Texas is like one of the main blocks of the Republican Party now. So now this country has to treat Texas like it's an inherently great place. So I think that's somewhat what's going on here. Because next, I mean, we went from the cook being like, he's still a small businessman. He's always talking in this movie about small businessman getting in the ass. But he's gone from being like just some guy with a shack to now he's being celebrated for his meat. It's like the shift.
Never skimp on the meat.
Yeah, but it's like the shift, and like he went from being like the outsider who was maybe rightfully left behind by this country to now he's in a position of power. So he's running the whole chili thing for this fucking big football game that's coming up.
Oh god, yeah, that's so fucking gross.
Like now he has a position of power. It's kind of fascinating.
Also, this is the first time we hear his name too, right? It's Drayton Sawyer.
Yeah, I just call him the cook. Like I'm just.
No, I mean I'm totally fine with that too. I wanted to note that. Yeah, now he has like an identity. He has a face to put to the identity, I guess.
I gotta say, this is like these movies are like the only films that guy did. He's fucking great. Like he should have been like a great character actor.
Yeah, he's really good. That's too bad he never did much else.
He's so good, and he's just so charismatic when he's on screen. It's fun to watch him, even when he's doing awful things. We're stretching over Stretch.
Uh-huh.
Who I really like Stretch as a character.
I do too. Caroline, played by Caroline Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know her from much, but she's really great in this.
Yeah, I think she mostly did other horror films after this.
Oh, okay. Good for her.
I always see her popping up in horror documentaries, and I think she was in Halloween 2, the Rob Zombie Halloween 2.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
I don't know, I like her character as like this DJ, which has got to be one of maybe the worst jobs. Like, that's a job you do if you love, if you're a woman, because she's getting harassed by those guys over the phone in the opening.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that probably happens a lot to female DJs. But yeah. I don't know, I like her character. I just think it's a fun idea. Like, she's a radio DJ who just wants to help, and it's like the worst decision she ever made.
Yeah, well, like, she has like this urgency in her, like, in her own agency, I guess, to kind of like mix metaphors or whatever. But like, how she's genuinely like interested in like solving, like, hey, like, this leads to something bigger. Like her career has led her to like finally more than just like playing the greatest hits, you know, like she can kind of make her own little mark,
yeah,
so to speak.
Well, I think you're right about her being a problem solver, because part of her thing is she has people call in and she like gives advice, you know, like a lot of like DJs kind of did for a while, like dropping her science, like that's her own little thing, like trying to help the world. And I think that comes into play later when her and Leatherface's dynamic eventually starts to develop, where she's having to talk.
We could call that a dynamic.
Yes, that's what we will call it until we dig into it a little more. And then, of course, we talked about Lefty, played by Dennis Hopper, which somehow, with all the characters we're going to cover, he might be the craziest guy in the movie. He's been hunting these chainsaw killers, and there's a scene in it which might be one of my favorite scenes in cinema, where he goes to buy his arsenal of chainsaws. Which doesn't make sense on any level of being like, how am I going to fight these chainsaw killers by having my own chainsaws? It's the scene of him like testing out the chainsaws and the guy in the background just laughing.
Well, he's like scared, I think.
It's a wild scene. And it's also a scene that I feel, I have no evidence of this, but I think it might be lifted directly from Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Which is the scene when Tuco goes and builds the gun that he's going to use to hunt Clint Eastwood down with.
Oh my god.
And he builds like the master gun, which also, if you watch that scene and you know anything about guns, you know what he's doing doesn't make any sense. Much like Dennis Hopper loading up on chainsaws doesn't really make any sense. So, I don't know, it feels very similar.
Well, is this Toe Hooper's Good, the Bad, and the Ugly then? Like, Stretch is the good, Lefty's the bad?
No, I think
the ugly?
Well, here's the thing. It's I think one of the things with Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's like they're kind of all three of those things, those three characters. Mm-hmm. But I think you could make the argument that Lefty and the family are both interchangeably bad and the ugly, because Lefty ends up kind of being the villain of this film. Like, it's a lot of what's happening is his fault. And talk about later when we talk about the scene where he finds that mural and he kicks it open and all the blood pours out, and we talk about like, oh, it's a mural of Texas, and it's like, oh, beneath this facade there's this violence and blood and carnage, and then but his takeaway is it's the devil's business. Like, he immediately goes the wrong direction, which I think could be seen as a commentary on the new moralism of like the Reagan era, where it was trying to bring back like right and wrong, you know, as like a combat to like the morally gray 70s. I think Lefty's Ronald Reagan.
Maybe not a direct parallel.
Bring it all down. Which, I gotta say, again, to talk about the comedy of this movie, the amount of static shots of him just, like, screaming. And it's, like, just, like, a wide shot of him, like, running and then slowly opening a gate while he's going, like, ah! Like, that's, like, peak comedy for me.
Yeah, no. This one is funny. This one, I get the funny.
Yeah.
Like, with, you know, all this other shit.
But now I think is a good time to talk about Chop Top.
One of the greatest supporting characters in movie history.
Yeah, his introduction is just fantastic. And
Played by the great Bill Moseley, who
Yep.
also shows up in Rob Zombie stuff.
and you know how Bill Moseley got the part?
Oh, I actually do know this. He made a parody of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with some buddies, and Tobe Hooper saw it and cast him in the movie because he was playing the hitchhiker in the parody.
Yeah. And
Do you remember the name of the parody?
I think it was called the Texas Chainsaw Manicure or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's it.
I've never seen it, but I've seen clips from it. But it did a very good job, like, recreating the movie, which is, in a pre-internet era, that's actually still kind of impressive.
Yeah.
But I guess Hooper was like, reached out to him, was like, I want to give you a part in, like, the sequel, and he thought he was getting a small part, and he gets Chop Top, who's like one of the main dudes. Yeah, Chop Top's fantastic, and it's like a 5-minute introduction for this guy.
Yeah, it just keeps going. He just keeps talking.
He gets like a whole monologue. Me and my brother Bubba, we listen to you every night. It's so good.
Music is my life.
Music in my life.
And his great toupee.
Yeah, Leatherface, you bitch dog, you ruined my Sonny Bono wig. And he's got a fucking plate in his head that he's always picking at, which is disgusting.
Yeah, I don't get what that is. Is he eating bits of his flesh?
Yeah, he's picking the skin and eating it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the grossest thing I've ever heard.
It's so awful. Now I'm flashback.
Oh yeah, and then he was in the backstory is that he was in Vietnam during the events of the first film, and that's why he gets the plate. And so there's the more satirical elements of like, oh yeah, this is what the Nam veterans came back as. Almost,
and there was some more details I heard in the background. I didn't the subtitled version. I was watching the movie with subtitles, and there was like they didn't subtitle these conversations I kind of heard in the background, so I couldn't make it out. But there was some backstory going on with him where he somehow like set up the whole Texas battleground place for them to live. Like I didn't pick up on all the details, but there was more going on there. Another thing I want to point out, just as a reference to the first movie, where I talked about that movie felt like the end of the world was happening at the periphery of everything. This movie, you hear radio broadcasts, and they're all talking about how like soybean futures are up, like all these things about how great the country's doing, which again, very reflective of the Reagan era.
No fallout from that.
Yep, yeah, that's how that works. It's always good, always boom, never bust. And I guess the other thing is that we talked about Leatherface's introduction in the first movie is like one of the great jump scares. I also think this one's a good jump scare.
No, it's terrific. Like down this dark hall.
Yeah.
It only lights up when he revs the chainsaw and charges at Stretch and Chop Top and skims Chop Top's head.
Yeah,
that reveals the metal plate. That's
plate.
So good.
Get that bitch, Leatherface. I love that he's alternatingly going. Chop Top's going like, Leatherface, you fuck. Like he's like yelling at him, and then like he'll be like, well, you get that bitch, Leatherface. Like he keeps like the two gears like all the time.
And you know what? I think that's why I can kind of understand why someone might not like this film too. This is kind of Tobe Hooper's Bad Boys 2, in that it's just pure excess.
Yeah.
And like it's so much, like it's writing like 11 all the time, and if you can't vibe with that, I totally get it.
Well, we also get another
that does get it to be obnoxious.
We get another hammer to the face scene, and it goes on for so fucking long. The character LG just getting hit in the face over and over again with a hammer, and it just keeps going. But I think the bigger moment of excess is the scene where Leatherface dry humps A Stretch with a chainsaw.
Yeah. Well, first he has to, because the chainsaw is revving up. He shoves it into the ice to cool it down, almost.
Yeah, and it like gets her
And
wet. It's like it's so obvious what's happening here. Like,
yeah,
I almost wonder if like I feel like that the conversations about knives in horror films being like phallic symbols and stuff like that. I feel like that must have been like kind of going mainstream at the time. And this feels like Hooper kind of like making fun of those ideas. Because he literally then, like, after he gets turned on by Stretch, who starts calling him, like, a good boy and saying he's the best. Which is just like, whoa.
so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he struggles to start the chainsaw. He struggles to perform. What a fucking movie.
Well, like, Leatherface is like a complicated character just from his limited amount of screen time and the limited amount that we know about him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he's forced to perform in the traditionally womanly roles, you know? Like, the you know, again, not to throw that gender grenade into the middle of this conversation.
It's totally appropriate to bring up, I think.
Yeah, and then it's like it stopped him from performing, and he doesn't know how to like interact with human beings, obviously because of like, you know, the whole cannibal thing and the murder.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, it's so just that it goes there is very I don't know if it's admirable, but it's interesting.
Bubba's got a girlfriend.
Yeah, well that's later. He doesn't know that first. But it's just like ludicrous. It's all the most insane shit you'll ever watch.
Yeah, it's just pure insanity. Like, again, it's like we probably can't even keep up with it.
No, no, I wouldn't try to.
It's it's a fucking wild movie. There's like the later scene where he's trying to put the face on her. That's a moment.
Well, no, they failed to kill Stretch's assistant at first, and then they skin him anyways, and then it's revealed later that he's still kind of alive.
Yeah, we never find out. Does he die? He dies, right? Yeah, he dies in that
I think
moment.
he dies after he helps her.
Yeah, but he had a rough go of it, LG.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't coming back from that.
Yeah.
So
LG had an unfortunate. You know what's crazy though? Is that the body count in this movie is like 2 people.
Well, it's okay. That's weird. So to bring it back to Dead Meat, a channel that is much bigger than ours and does not need to be referenced, but whatever. They I think he tallied like 8 because everyone in the movie except Stretch dies. Like every central character dies, but in the sequels, Leatherface comes back. In this, I think he does die.
Yeah, but we don't see him really. There's enough ambiguity that he gets a chainsaw through the stomach, but he's
and then a grenade goes off.
He's Leatherface though. You never know.
I mean, I guess, but like,
and I think there was a big like slasher scene that was deleted from the movie that would have involved like more civilians getting killed, and I think it was cut out for like pacing reasons. And I've heard it's like this, like it was. I don't even know if they filmed it, but it was like an elaborate scene, and I think it's the right move. I would say if I had one complaint, I think the movie kind of its approach is being a little too long. Where it wears out its welcome. Like Texas Chainsaw, the first one's 83 minutes. This one's like 101. I think 83 is about right for any movie titled Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah. I honestly do wish it was a little shorter. And the central characters, like, it's a small scale movie.
Yeah.
It's honestly just kind of as small as the first. Like, the plot makes it seem like it's going to be bigger at first, but the focus becomes so narrow that it's, like, irrelevant.
It's just more over the top. And I also think maybe part of that was, famous, like we talked about, where Tobe Hooper wanted a PG rating and failed miserably to achieve it. I think that now he's like, well, now I don't have to try for a PG rating. So he's just going full out, like, all right, it's R-rated. I'm going to go as far as I possibly can. So,
I mean, I don't know how much more you have to say, but I got I have a whole thesis on what I think the final moments of the film mean.
We can just start going to that. We got to talk about that. They do the dinner sequence in this. That's basically just a repeat of the dinner sequence from the first movie. Like almost beat for beat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
To the point where they do bring out Grandpa again. Although this time I think they specify that he's 130 years old.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And
the makeup looks better, but I mean, the budget's bigger, so what are you going to do?
yeah, but also I forgot to bring up in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think a genuinely funny shot in that movie is the scene where they're like, all right, we're going to kill that girl now. Let's let Grandpa do it because Grandpa's the best killer. And they keep putting the hammer in Grandpa's hands and it's just falling out. That's in the first movie and it's funny, and they repeat it here and it's funnier too. But I think if you watch that first movie and you can get past the horror of it, it's like it's one of the funniest shots is just Leatherface reaching out, picking up the hammer again, dropping it, picking up the hammer again, dropping it, picking up the hammer again. And it just keeps going.
I don't know if I'll ever get past the horror in the first film is the thing, you know? Like, it's just so terrifying to me.
Don't blame you. Can't blame you, really, you know?
Oh, also, I want to shout out the line that it's either sex or the saw. Now, the cook tells Leatherface that sex, well, no one knows what that's like, but the saw is family.
Family
There's
unit.
a lot to read into that.
Nothing wrong with the family unit.
Wow.
White picket fences.
Yep.
2.5 children.
2.5. Yeah. There's some insight into the nuclear family in America, I guess.
And then we just got to say that the climax of the movie is Dennis Hopper getting into a chainsaw duel with Leatherface.
Yep. And Chop Top chasing around.
But that fight might be like the most epic confrontation in horror cinema history.
Well, it's really well directed, like just from like an action standpoint.
Mm.
You know, like it's kind of like invigorating, but like it's also you kind of do want them all to die.
Yeah.
It's like they're all horrible, awful, disgusting people.
Which is just Dennis Hopper screaming. He's the Lord of the Harvest.
I know, like what is that? What
like
does
he's
that
like
mean?
he's like a religious fanatic. Like he's gone crazy. Like, oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's all just ludicrous insanity, and then the cook blows them all up with a grenade from inside the hitchhiker's body.
He kind of does it on accident, because the whole movie he's always talking about maybe it's time to shut down. Like he keeps saying that. Like you feel like that he probably grabs that grenade like once a week, thinking like even when no one's attacking him, thinking he might blow himself up. But the only reason that it actually goes off is because Grandpa stands up, throws the hammer, misses Dennis Hopper, hits Leatherface, who falls, and then his chainsaw goes through the floor and gets the cook, who drops the grenade.
I guess I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, you know.
Like,
Like they end up doing more damage to themselves than Dennis Hopper did to them.
oh, that's kind of perfect. Yeah.
So, and Dennis Hopper's the one who gets stretched into this whole mess. So, like, he's the true villain of the film.
I don't know. He's never eaten anybody. I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm just saying. When you're going up against cannibals.
I guess. There's also, real quickly, I guess we should mention it's a different actor playing Leatherface this time. Because Leatherface is like a completely different character almost. Which isn't like a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah, well, he's growing up.
And he does the chainsaw dance a lot. Like, you know what? The first movie's the chainsaw dance. This is more the chainsaw jig.
I was about to say, yeah, he kind of just like waves it a little bit over his head. Kind of a little shake back and forth.
Yeah, for no reason.
I think that's just how he communicates now.
Like, he's closing in on people, and then he stops to do the little jig. Like, Oh, Leatherface.
Okay, so at the end, when it's just down to Chop Top and Stretch, right, and they go through that final showdown, and he's slashing her up, and she's able to get that grandma's chainsaw, right? Is that who that is?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
Okay.
that, there's just, I don't know at that point.
He's defeated by Stretch, who's basically just lost her mind, the same as Sally at the end of the first film. But here it's like, it's victorious, almost, right? And she's standing and screaming and cheering at the top of this rundown amusement park. And I think that's like Tobe Hooper saying, like, at the end of like all this insanity, like it's just worthless, empty entertainment. Like, I don't know. I think he's trying to say something like more cynical than just like a victorious end to the cannibals,
Yeah, that's not a
like
bad.
like they have to be everyone in this film goes crazy because they have to be crazy to like embark on this narrative that he's strung up for them.
Well, I think also a lot of the complaints of the first movie are that Sally is like mostly just tortured the whole movie. Like, she's a final girl that like she never really fights back. Like, all her victories are like it's an accident that the hitchhiker gets run over by that truck, and then it's the truck driver who throws the hammer at Leatherface that makes him fall and cut his leg. She's just running around screaming. So it's like a thing where like in this one, Stretch is triumphant, but yeah, the zoom out, it's kind of like, yeah, she won, but like, what did she win? Like, this isn't a better end for her. Like,
Yeah, like she survived and now it's just like nothing. She doesn't have anything anymore.
mm-hmm.
Like the life she had before last night is like not going to be the life she has the rest of her life. So yeah, it's a weird distorted evolution of Sally from the first film, much like the rest of TCM2 is a distorted evolution of events from the first film.
I also think it's finger wagging at like people who like they want a clear moralistic victory at the end of a film. It's just like she wins, but like it's like now she's just a ruler of this craziness. Like, there's no victory here.
It's a great movie. I gotta be honest, I don't like revisiting it that much just because I can't fully wrap myself around it.
Yeah.
But it's a great movie that I would recommend to horror fans. Not anyone who's not a horror fan, honestly.
Yeah, if you've been putting it off for whatever reason, it's worth watching. If you like the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's 100% different. And I know a lot of people who tell me they saw Texas Chainsaw 2 the first time and like hated it, but then like liked it on like rewatch. So I guess that's something to just make clear. But yeah, it's I like it. I understand why people don't like it. Honestly, it's a weird movie. But I think it's pretty great.
I do too. Like, I guess that's the barometer for me. Then, like, I like Tobe Hooper's other films, so I can get on board with TCM2. If you check out his other films that aren't Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you end up liking them, you'll probably like Texas Chainsaw Massacre too.
Yeah,
they're much more in common with like Invaders from Mars
and Life Force.
Definitely Life Force. Yeah, this might be crazier than Life Force, just like on sheer charisma alone. I don't know.
All right, here's my suggestion. If you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 or Life Force, go watch Life Force, and then remember that Diego just said that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 might be crazier than Life Force.
Am I wrong?
Nope.
Yeah, so if you can get on board with that, enjoy Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And rest in peace, Tobe Hooper. What a great filmography you had. So thank you for sharing that with the world. And Matt, thank you for joining me on this weird-ass Halloween retrospective that we cobbled together totally not at the last minute.
Yep, it's only, how many days are we from Halloween? Like 5 days?
I don't know. I'm going to try to have this up by the morning for the Patreons.
All right.
We'll see. And then I'll have this out the day before Halloween for everyone else.
Good plan.
Yeah.
Well, happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Where can the people find you?
I'm at EmperorOTN at twitter.com.
And you can find me at the Diego Crespo. Check out the Waffle Press on Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Patreon. And check out the other retrospectives we got going on, like Avatar, The Last Airbender, other Halloween stuff like Talking George Romero's Dead series of films. Everyone likes zombies and all that jazz. So thanks again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We have been professionally unprofessional.